Up next, we discuss the continuing importance of strength training as one ages and how the actual training itself must evolve, though, as your body changes over time. Welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys here with Tunde Ogunlana. And for our second part of our conversation today, Tunde, I sent you something about this the other day. And it was an article dealing with how you have to change your workouts as you go into your 40s and 50s, particularly your strength training workouts. And, looking at it from the standpoint of how, your joints change, your muscles and so forth. But it's not that you need to not strength train anymore, but just the kinds of things that you do has to evolve and has to take into account how your body has changes. So, really, what stood out to you, or what was your biggest takeaway from the story about building and retaining muscle and strength training in your 40s and 50s as a man who's kind of smack in the middle of that?
Yeah. Thanks for that last part.
In case you didn't know.
Listen, I guess I just told everyone my birthday's on Sunday. So, and I'll be 48. So I'm right, like you said, I'm right there. So the first thing it reminded me is I'm not 25 anymore. Because that was the real one is, I guess as we age, and that's interesting. It's actually a serious comment. As a man, I can't speak for women, but I say as a man that was an NCAA athlete, I played basketball in college, and that was always athletic. I always worked out, and I always, it just was a very athletic as a younger man.
Tunde, I think you're
part of it is the psychology.
Well, Tunde, I think you're contractually required to say a D1 NCAA athlete, aren't you?
Oh. They didn't have NIL back then, so they didn't know contracts. I just had to sneak food from the school cafeteria. But
so a lot different than it was. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think just the idea that as men, that's why I want to speak in that way. And I'll be vulnerable here. It's scary to get old. It doesn't feel good. That your body's breaking down. It doesn't feel good that at this point, I can lift weights exactly like I remember lifting them 20 years ago, but I don't put on any muscle, like that my testosterone is going down compared to, 15, 20 years ago. So that's what I'm saying is because, one of the things I'm reading here, he said, did you lift too heavy? Some of the negative things, you don't do enough cardio, all that. And when you age, and I think the lifting too heavy part is something I see a lot of men kind of my age, even a little bit older doing, because I think there's this desire in your mind to not want to believe that you do need to change how you exercise, that your body has changed. You're no longer that young guy. And maybe if you're in a gym, you look around, you see guys in their 20s and 30s all jacked up and doing this stuff. And you're thinking, man, I can still compete. So to me, that's kind of the thing. One of the things that stuck out the most is when I was reading it, kind of digesting, like you said, as a man who's right here in this position of the 40s and 50s kind of age range, it's kind of reminding me of my own journey in this exercise and strength training, dimension, which is, I don't like to think about it, but I can no longer perform in physically in strength training how I used to. Yeah. It doesn't feel good. So,
well, see that to me is the rub, so to speak, is where you're trying to reconcile. Because yes, as you get older, your strength declines. Now, even if you're someone who's very active and still does training, I still lift weights in a similar way that I did when I was 16, when I was 26, then I was 36, and like where I am now. But I have, and this is out of necessity, before I read this, adjusted kind of like I don't go up as high. I'll still go pretty high, but not up as high. I don't push myself to the same degree as I did then. And so to really read underlying reasons why it's important to adjust, and some of the things that that you should consider adjusting. Like now, one of the things you pointed out, for example, was the heavy weights, and like the premise of this piece, and we'll have it in the show notes, was that you could still build muscle as you age, but when you're younger, that's like, okay, the way to build muscle, you lift heavy to build muscle, so it's like, okay, but he's like, now as you age though, while your muscles may be able to keep up to some degree, to a lesser degree, your joints, so you actually, if you're lifting too heavy as you get older, you're putting strain on your joints that a younger person wouldn't even have. And so the having that know-how, so to speak, can be very valuable to someone as you continue that journey, because you might not recognize that. Like, you still say, hey, I can still put it up or whatever. Or, as you said, kind of your environment around you might be in a gym and looking like, oh, I want to put it up like these young boys are putting it up. But that may not be the right approach at that age. But that doesn't mean that you have to get out the game all entirely, because that's what I see a lot of times as well, is like, well, I'm going to get out of the game entirely because I can't do what I used to do. Whereas what it is instead of doing, real heavy 4 times, maybe you should do something that you can lift 12 times, and then that be where you are, and still be able to build the muscle, but reduce the strain on your joints a lot. So it was something, the thing that hurt me, though, I'll tell you this, just from a personal standpoint, one of the things that I like to do, I like the feeling it gives me when I'm done doing it, are the box jumps. I really enjoy box jumps. And, it was like, oh no, as you get older, you got to stop doing the box jumps. I'm like, oh no, I don't know if I can give up the box jumps. So I'm not wearing a weight vest or anything. I'm just doing my body weight. But, I can see, though, because it's an explosive motion. And the reason I do it is because I want to maintain some explosiveness. But they're like, oh, well, maybe you got to do kettle swings instead of that. So different tweaks, and you don't read things and then change everything you do, so to speak. But what it does is provide something like this is provide different perspective that you can then incorporate into your own perspective. And what it isn't is one size fits all, which a lot of times, like I said, discourages people, because it's like, well, here's how you do it. And if somebody who can't do it reads that, then they're just like, all right, well, that's not for me. When maybe it still could be for you if you had a different, a broader perspective on what the options were.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. More power to you for box jumps. This is the hardest thing I do is walk on a treadmill on an incline.
That's good too, though. That's a good thing to do.
You stay with those box jumps over there with Mr. Young Guy.
Well, but see, I also but you've had surgeries though that I haven't had though, so it's a little different as far as being able to use like I
appreciate that, James.
Say what?
I'll just say, I appreciate that. I'll just tell the audience, no, I'm just lazier than you. Those surgeries, probably, I could probably still do it, but yeah, I'm just not doing box jumps, bro. That's it.
I tried to give you the lifeline, man.
Nah, man. I'm gonna walk my dog. That's what we do. I walk the dog for an hour. That's the cardio. Man, but it is. But that's why it's an interesting conversation, especially for us specifically, right, guys in our 40s. I recognize when you gave us 16, 26, 36 that you omitted that we're probably at 46 right now, but that's okay. So I won't put you in the late 40s. I'll still say you're hovering in the mid 40s. As I officially, in there,
man. I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, I'll officially be tipped into no more mid by Sunday. I'll be late, but I think that it's very interesting. And I think that's why, honestly, for both of us, right, we both like to work out, lift weights, kind of feel good, like you said, about the feeling of exercise, how it makes you feel afterwards, stress release, all that kind of stuff. But, and I know that we're having this discussion based on kind of this article as an entry to it. But one area that I felt very intrigued about, which wasn't part of this article, was as we age, we know that how we strength train and recover changes. But the other part that is important here is also nutrition, right? Like, as we age, what we can put in our bodies also, I mean, obviously we can put anything in our body, but how our bodies react, maybe is how I should say it, to what we put into them changes. Our metabolism slows. Like we talk about, if our testosterone goes down, that naturally lowers our levels of our metabolism rate too. So that means, as a man, the things I used to eat when I was 20, 25, and I could go to the gym and, eat 2 large pizzas, go to the gym and not, still have an 8-pack. If I eat 2 large pizzas now, I'm not going anywhere for 3 days. So, and I'm definitely not going to have an 8-pack, So, if you could speak, I wouldn't mind getting your thoughts, because I know you're very, you take a lot of care with this and for yourself personally. Like, what would you say to the audience, anyone who's listening to us, saying, kind of, guys, I appreciate, this transition of strength training as we age, but also how can I complement that with what I'm putting in my body, the nutrition side?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because where you start with anything is always with the diet and what you put in your body. That's going to be the vast majority of what you see and how you feel, So in the same way, I would say this, they're complementary. And so in the same way that what you eat is going to be, let's say how you're, if you have, and I'll use the analogy of an automobile, but that's going to be comparable to how you perform from an engine standpoint and how, you put the fuel in, and this is how good that engine works based on that. If you put fuel with a lot of bad stuff in it, then the engine goes bad more quickly and you might have to get service or whatever. But strength training, for example, would be more about how you take care of the wheels and the axles and actually the mechanical moving pieces of it. And so you have to do both, so to speak, and strength training. And then I add on that, like you said, the cardiovascular stuff, getting stuff to get your heart moving and heart beating from time to time. And so as we get older, my experience, and then also just my research on this, is that your body just becomes less resilient. It becomes less resilient, more sensitive, and that kind of thing. So, and you can feel that, the same, like you said, you ate those pizzas before and your body would just kind of, like chuck it off and be ready to go again. And now it'd be like, oh man, your body's like, man, what have you done to me? Type of thing. And so you have to be more conscious of, okay, well, if I want to perform a certain way, whether it be at work or whether it be being able to do something with my kids or whatever, then I'm going to have to do it from a dietary standpoint and make sure that I still have the motivation and the wherewithal to move around. But then you also have to take care of yourself physically so that you actually can move around and you're not popping a muscle every time or hurting yourself every time you try to do something. So I think it's really complementary and it's something you should pay attention to. For me, the thing that's helped me the most is listening to my body, like really listening to my body. Not like when you're a kid, you don't really have to do it as much, but you listen to your body. Like, so if I eat something and it makes me super sluggish, then it's like, all right, well, you know what? I'm either not going to eat that during the day. I'm not going to eat that till 6:00 at night when I don't have to do anything else, or, like I'm just not going to eat it, and then the same thing with my exercises. Like I'm very consistent with it, but I am evolving them all the time, because if I start feeling something in my elbow a little bit, then it's like, all right, well, I'm not doing anything that I'm going to feel that on for a few months, because, and this is talked about in the article, recovery takes longer, and injuries, can take longer to heal as well. Just normal recovery after workout. So for me, it's like, okay, like recently my elbow was bothering me like in December. And so I just stopped doing any elbow bend stuff, and I was working a lot on my lower body and, core and things like that, a little bit of shoulder, stuff like that, but nothing that required me to bend my elbow. I just cut it out for 3 months, but I didn't miss workouts. I just did something different. And then
let me ask you
happily
a quick question
just got
on that,
back
actually.
in, like this month, and I'm able to do the elbow stuff again. So.
I got a quick question for you, and then I know we'll close it out. As you say that, because I've been thinking the same thing. I mean, when you mentioned my surgeries, for the audience, I got 2 ACL tears, torn Achilles. I got herniated discs in my back. I got a few issues. I got a torn shoulder. So, one thing, as I'm aging, I started taking supplements like collagen and creatine and certain things. And I know we're not here for you to sell yourself as a doctor. You're an intellectual property attorney. Let me make that clear for everyone. But as someone who finds interest in this personally, I mean, I know I'm not saying you're recommending to people listening, but would you say that things like those type of supplements they may be helpful, obviously, if consulting with your medical professional for things like joints? Because like you're saying, I feel it too, that my ankles,
what's been your
my knees.
experience with like the collagen that you've taken?
No, I just started it actually in the last week. So I think I was telling my wife, like, I'm going to do it for 60 days and then really try and give myself an assessment of how I'm feeling. Because I started feeling more pains and kind of just, those kind of cranks and kinks in my joints, in my ankle when I walk, my knee. So things I wasn't feeling a year or two ago. So I'm just wondering if maybe my joints are deteriorating, the collagen, the ligaments, the things holding the cartilage together, all that stuff.
Well, like the supplement industry, and there's supplements, so they're supposed to supplement with, your existing diet and so forth. They're not like supposed to just cover up everything. What they have, like, it can be a piece of the puzzle, but and there are things that are safe and effective, like I know, like, for example, my uncle had a lot of success with collagen, for example, and he's much older than you, and he felt the difference in terms of his ability to move around all the time. What the supplement industry wants you to do is to over rely on them, whether you're getting the benefits or not, and because it's a for-profit thing. There are benefits that can be had though for different things. Of course, you always got to be very careful. You talk to healthcare, everything like that, but there are things you can do that you can consume to make things better. But what I found, though, I will say this. And this is not any consolation really, because it just like, and I still struggle with this. Like the basics though are the things that'll make the biggest difference. Like you take a walk every day, that'll make a huge difference for you. Here's the one that I would struggle with. You stretch every day. Like take time to stretch, do stretch motions every day. That'll make the biggest difference in terms of how you feel, more so than collagen. And that's not to say collagen doesn't help, but it's it's almost like, I mean, and it comes back, I'll throw this in economic term for you. There's no free lunch, like, so a lot of times the things that make the biggest difference are the things that do require a level of intentionality and, of thoughtfulness and time, at least until, I mean, we're going to see what all these peptide things, like they already got the GLP-1s, but then they got all these other peptides coming out. So we'll see once that happens. And a lot of times with stuff like this, and I know this takes us off a completely different path, but a lot of things like that, like it seems like they're even with the GLP-1s, like there's been a lot of people having very good results in that stuff. You never know what the trade-offs are going to be, whether it be 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And so you are a guinea pig.
But there's side
those
effects
are things that may be able to help people as
showing
well.
up. Yeah.
Say what?
Yeah. No, I think I was just saying there's side effects already with the GLP-1s that are starting to be more discussed, that are negative side effects.
That's the economics thing. There is no free lunch, basically.
Yeah.
Like, so there are,
that's what I was going to say.
There are trade-offs for everything. And so, usually the more you have to work for it, a lot of times, like there aren't really any trade-offs for stretching every day other than, you just got to make yourself do it. And that's not easy to do. Or taking a walk, there's not many negative trade-offs. Now, the walk thing, actually, there could be some as far as impact. If you're carrying extra weight, then that can be harder on your joints. So there's a lot going on. And so it's not something that I think with all of the health and fitness advice, it's hard to just read it and then to have a direct takeaway and say, this is what I'm going to do. A lot of times it's you consume the stuff and you kind of do what you think works for you. And then you start slow and try to be consistent, which this is in the piece. Being consistent is the most important thing with anything.
Well, and I think it's also just as we finish out, kind of back for me, it's also where I started in this discussion is really just understanding that you're aging, your body is corroding and nature is going to win at some point. Death is batting 1,000. Like, from, Ponce de Leon to all these other people try to find, the secrets of the fountain of youth, whatever. And no one ever has. And so, and maybe that's by design, right? Like, dying is part of the living process. So I think it's in the 30,000 foot. It's kind of how we got to look at this. Our bodies are slowly deteriorating as they were designed to do. And as we want to maintain a certain standard of either health or physical ability, we just, as like you said about an engine earlier on, or you could say in this case, the whole car. If the car is getting older, you just got to give it a little more care and maybe care for it in different ways when you've got a 23-year-old car versus when the car was only 6 months old. So, but the car can still run,
No. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, there's people with 60-year-old cars, running around, but they're like, they're taking care of
they understand.
Every day.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not riding through salty, snowy grounds and then just letting it sit on there forever. Like, so yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I think what people want is their body, like as you age and you understand it's not going to work the same, but they want it to be able to do the stuff that they want to be able to do. And I think the biggest thing from that is that you're going to have to put stuff in order to get stuff out. If you want your body to continue to be able to give you access to things that you want to do, then you're going to, the younger you are, the less you have to do about that. And it actually trains you in all the wrong habits, because it's like, when you're 20, you don't have to do anything to kind of maintain what you are. You know what I'm saying? But then when you're 40 or when you're 50, you have to do stuff to get that same level of performance out. And so that's been my kind of realization over the past few years is like, okay, what does my body need? What do I need to do to stay balanced from a physical, from a mental standpoint, so I can go toss the football or kick the soccer ball with my kids or do whatever, So, because that's very important because I want to be able to do that stuff without pulling up lame every 5 minutes, So yeah, but I think we can wrap from there. We appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call It Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Until next time, I'm James Keys.
I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
All right, we'll talk soon.